Hey, a new Ministry of Balance Season of Change is what the title is called for this article. And it is September 6th, 2024. These patch notes will be live on September 9th. So just a couple of days. There are a lot of buffs that we will get into, but I'll start with the nerfs because I think that most people really care about that. And then we'll get into the commander changes. The nerfs were to the Azurlin Chapayev, the Cristofo Colombo, the Z-52, and the Duncan. The big thing I think that people wanted to have nerfed was that Chapayev, and I don't think it really got nerfed. They took the reload and increased it from 8 seconds to 9.2 seconds. So that's a 1.2 second increase in the reload, and I just don't think that that's enough. Because I don't think that it's addressing the brokenness of the Azurlin Chapayev. For those of you that don't know, the Azurlin Chapayev has a higher HE pin for those low caliber 152 millimeter guns that it has, and it has higher HE damage. And so what they've done effectively is, and the downside of the ship, why it's not as good as the Azurlin Chapayev in as far as setting fires, is that the fire chances whenever you use the full build is like 0.5%. It's a very low fire chance percentage. But really, it makes it a much stronger ship than the regular Chapayev because you just consistently thump other ships. And the only ships that can really kind of hold up against it are the battleships because you don't light the fires that other light cruisers will light on those battleships that keep them worried about you. You still can hit battleships for a significant amount of damage, but really you bully, especially light cruisers, but just cruisers in general, you bully, and also DDs because you pin everything and you get that full HE damage. That your alpha damage is just so high. And what I think Wargaming should have done is they should have just lowered the base HE damage on the ship because no matter what, it's going to hit for a lot. But if you change that base damage of it, it just doesn't make it quite as much of a bully. They also could have changed the HE pin and just said, hey, this is going to have higher HE damage. HE pin does not. I think that would be the biggest nerf they could give to it is just reset the HE pin to be normal and then just give it a lot more HE alpha damage. But they won't do that because this is their cash cow. So um, I shouldn't say that. I don't know what they're trying to do, but I don't think that slowing down the reload speed is going to really do anything to break this ship. Also, I did get an email today from Wargaming that says that players who are upset about this change can exchange the ship for a tier 7 counterpart. Don't do that. The ship's still really strong. If you have the ship, don't do that. As long as Wargaming leaves it broken, you might as well use it in fleet battles and stuff like that. But yeah, once again, I'll end my rant. I don't think that this is going to really change the brokenness of the Azurlane Chapayev. Okay, we'll stop talking about that. We'll get into the Colombo here. The Colombo is a ship that I think is really broken because of how its AP can penetrate and do damage to people. I will be well angled and it still just thumps me. So a lot of people said that this ship did not get hit very hard. I think it did. I think that this change of the maximum penetration angle reduced from 70 to 65 degrees for the AP, and the minimum being reduced from 55 to 50 degrees is actually a very big change for this ship. I think that you'll see it doing a lot less damage versus well-angled ships because it has lower caliber battleship guns. So if you can use your armor against it, it makes it much harder to use the ship. I think that where they could have really kind of hurt this thing is really just taking the 3,000 damage or 3,000 hit points off of it. I don't really know exactly why they did that. It seems like I don't know. It having that health pool was very important for it because it's not the best armor scheme. Aside from that, the turrets get knocked out very easily. I don't think it was as strong as what people thought. The main thing is that people could be well angled against you and you would still hurt them pretty badly. So I think that this specifically just changing the penetration angles, maximum and minimum, is a big nerf for this thing. So hopefully we still see it be a very high quality ship and that it's not just unplayable now. I think it'll still be good, but I think it'll really people will subtly feel that change to the pin angles. Next is the Z52. The main battery load has been increased from 2.9 to 4.1 seconds. I think that because it has a large health pool and specifically that sonar, it was successful in dueling versus say like Darings or Gearings or any other gunboaty DD at legendary tier. But I think that this increase is actually this is going to be felt more than what people think of just a 0.2 second difference. just because HE alpha for the Germans is quite low. They do have better penetration, but it does not quite do as much total alpha damage like per minute, as the daring and the gearing and other gunboat DDs at the tier. And then the torpedo reload time increased by 5 seconds. That's a pretty minimal one. The detectability by range by sea increased from 6.9 to 7.1 kilometers. Once again, kind of negligible, but really not so, because whenever it comes down to it, DD detection is very minuscule in this game because you can use commanders to change it so much. So um, I don't know. We'll see how this plays out. I don't think it's the biggest nerf. They've done a couple other things about detectability, just in different types of like firing when you're in smoke and by air detection. And then the big thing I think is that the sonar range was reduced from 5.9 kilometers to 5.7 kilometers. I'm glad they didn't touch the duration. I think that is more fair to just take 2.2 kilometers off of it. I think that the ship that people are hoping, or maybe the owners aren't, but I think the ship that is probably the most overpowered right now is actually the Lucian. And I think that I'll have some suggestions for that in a second here, or we can talk about it real quick. I think the Lucian is extremely strong because you can basically print a whole nother ship with those heals that come with it. I think the thing that Wargaming should do is they shouldn't change the sonar on it. I think they should just change the base health pool hit points on there. I think if you take like 3,000 hit points off of it, it becomes a much more balanced ship where people have to actually pick when they want to just rush in because they might lose all their health points before they can get that heal off, and it really just makes them think twice about how they play. Where right now it can go unpunished and completely re-heal from making a bad decision. So that's my thoughts on the Lucian Z52. Once again, getting back to the actual subject here. I think it got nerfed, but I don't think it's really going to be as bad as people think. I think that there were some broken parts, and Wargaming has addressed that. So I think it'll be balanced, and I don't think it'll be a ship that's like unplayable now that it's been nerfed. Lastly, here the Duncan. The repair party cooldown time increased from 80 to 120 seconds. Restored HP reduced from 2% to 1.6% per second. This is a pretty big nerf just because the Duncan could like really just like print out those heals. It could print a new ship pretty quickly and it could do it multiple times just because it's a quite large heal as well. So um, not too much there. I think that Duncan owners just need to be more careful about how they play now. They're going to get punished for their mistakes more rapidly, or they won't be able to get out of their mistakes quite as easily as they were before. And then let's hop into these commander changes real quick. So Harold B. Farncombe, he is the Commonwealth Cruiser Commander, the one that came out with the Brisbane, and the Brisbane has been buffed, and so is Herald. So kind of nice to see those changes coming through. The big complaint was that Herald was a smoke commander, and Brisbane didn't have a smoke, and they came out together, and Brisbane really suffered. But now Brisbane has the option to take a smoke. We'll get into that when we get up to the buffs. But Harold has been his base trait, careful, has been improved. The reduction in ship detectability time after firing the main guns while in smoke improved from a maximum of 10% to 15%. It's pretty rare that this perk gets used. Whenever it comes to inspirations, you guys know, or I guess you don't know. For those of you that know me, know that I think that inspirations you take should be the ones that are going to affect every part of your game, not just maybe two salvos of the game. So um, that being said, that's not a huge buff. The reduction in main battery reload time improved from 2% to 3%. That is kind of nice to have. He just makes you reload a little bit faster. And then the unique skill on his ship, Shell from the Ghost, increase in cruiser main battery range and shell grouping while in a smoke screen improved from a maximum of 4% to 5%. Once again, very small changes for him, but it is nice to see the buff coming out. It definitely won't be game breaking, it just makes whatever ship he's on a little bit more effective. And then Jerzy Świrski, he has a new Rio 4 skill, Fox Flare. I think this is unique to only him right now, but increases the duration of radar to match that of Smoke Generator while the latter is active, and reduces main battery reload time by up to 10% while radar is active. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays in the game. There is a new Pan-European line coming out that has a couple ships with radars and smoke screens. So we'll see that being used on them, and I'll report back more information on that perk for now. But all the current ships in the game I don't think are affected by this, really. The reduces main battery reload time up to 10% while radar is active will be useful for the small end and the Orkan, that is. But everything else will be new, so we'll see how that evolves into the game. Lastly, here we will quickly go through the buffs. Florida was a ship that a lot of people, a lot of the owners complained about. They just felt like it had so much potential, and then you would take you'd take your shots, and then just nothing would happen, and you'd also get chipped quite easily whenever you were shot at. They have not changed the armor. Wargaming very rarely will change the armor scheme, and these buffs they'll usually do something to change the guns, and they have done that, and they've buffed it in a big way. So we'll see how this plays out. I think that it's important to note that the shell mass was increased, so you have a higher penetration chance. The reload was knocked down 2.5 seconds off the reload is a very big buff. And then main battery dispersion improved by 11% and main battery shell grouping increased by 2.9%. This is one of the largest buffs that I've seen in the game for any ship. So it'll be fun to play Florida. I think it'll be very strong now. Once again, the armor is still not great, but you do have a lot of guns. So we'll see how it unfolds, but I think it'll be quite good. Vermont is a very frustrating ship. That's what's the next thing to be buffed. I don't think they did enough. I am an Ohio owner. I am a Vermont owner, and they have the same caliber of guns, and they perform so differently. And it's really just one of the most frustrating things in the game to take a salvo that you think is going to absolutely dev strike someone, and it just falls so flat. You maybe do like 4,000 damage with like 5 overpins or something like that. So it'll be interesting to see how they change the Vermont in the future. I don't think this is going to be enough. It's really about how the shells perform, not about their damage overall. And that's the only thing that got upgraded besides the reload, which they knocked a second off of, which is nice. But really they need to do something to fix the shell so they're just more consistent whenever they are in the air and whenever they hit. So we'll see what happens there in the future. I wouldn't get too excited if I was a Vermont owner. This is still not going to be a super viable ship in my mind. Błyskawica and Błyskawica B have been in the game for a long time, and they've been power crept. It's just kind of how the game works. I think they've both been in the game for, or at least the Błyskawica has been in the game for like 4 years or something like that. So it's good to see that it got the big buff. I think the biggest thing is the torpedoes. Going from 57 to 69 base speed on the knots is just huge. So we'll see what happens. They're also pretty much a 2,000 damage bonus on there, and then 1.5 kilometers of extra range. I think that it's going to be pretty viable now as a torp boat. It's still, I mean, when it came out in the game, it was one of the best gunboats, but really there's a lot of things that just reload so much faster than it and have better firing angles as a DD so that you can kind of engage at your own pace. So we'll see how it does in the gunboat game, but the torpedoes are definitely a lot stronger now. Should be a fun ship to play. I'll have to take it out. I haven't taken it out in probably like 2 years or something, but we've already kind of talked about the Brisbane. It got a nice buff, half second taken off the reload. The torpedoes come back 21 seconds faster. The reload or the radar duration has increased from 22 to 25 seconds, and the range has added an extra half kilometer on there. So it's one of the longest radars in the game that isn't Russian now. And the smoke generator consumable, excuse me, can be used instead of radar. So there's a lot more ways the ship can be played now. I think that the Minotaur still is the better ship, but you can't start fires, and you have longer torpedoes with the Brisbane. So we'll see how it turns out here. It still is a ship that explodes extremely easily and seems to do so easier than a Minotaur for some reason. But yeah, we'll see. I think it's a good buff and it's a needed one. I still don't know how viable it's going to be. Some ships you can just buff everything about them and they're still not extremely viable. I think that the Brisbane might be one of those, but it is nice to see that extra couple seconds on the radar and the more range. It will be stronger as far as radar ships go. So I hope that I don't see a lot of people in smokes in it. I think that the Minotaur is a better ship for that, but the Minotaur also you can swap out the smoke for a radar. So they've become much more similar. You just have the longer torpedoes, the guns that don't perform quite as well in the Brisbane, but you do have the longer torpedoes, and then you also get HE shells, so you can start fires, which is quite nice. Zuiho and Independence have both been buffed. I will let you read through those on the screen. I'm going to skip over them. I think that they're nice little buffs, but I won't go too into detail. The big thing with those is that they're very hard to land torpedoes with, and they've changed that. So hopefully, this buff makes that a little bit better. Algeria is another ship like the Błyskawica that's been in the game for quite some time, and the Algeria White is the Christmas version if you're not familiar with it, but it's just gotten a buff across the board. Better HE and AP damage, more range on the shells. The stock rudder has been improved a little bit, so it's reduced speed or reduced changing speed, so from 3.4 to 12 seconds. And then the upgraded hull rudder is from 9.5 to 8.5 seconds, and they've also increased the speed. 1.5 knots is nothing to joke about or laugh at. I think that that's going to make this much more viable. Just giving those French ships any more speed and they get the speed boosts. They're just fast. They're rapid. Their armor is their speed. So Moving on from there, the Charles Martel and St. Louis have both had shell damage increases. Just good buffs to have. They were ships that were falling behind. You never saw them in battles just because they blew up very easily and they just didn't do consistent damage. Hopefully, the shell damage helps them do that. I still think that the St. Louis needs something a little bit different. I apologize for mispronouncing it earlier. Anyways, moving on, Amalfi and Brindisi. They got some big upgrades. The big thing to note is that they have the PC reload time again. I don't know why Wargaming really changed that to begin with, but I'm glad that they can still shoot SAP and a little bit faster now. And the other thing to note with both of them is shared buff here is that their smokescreen duration has increased from 20 to 30 seconds, which is quite nice. So just a little bit more time in smoke. You know, anything extra on those smoke screens is just so nice. And then the Brindisi also had some hit point upgrades. So the stock hull got 3,000 more hit points, and the upgraded hull got it looks like just under 3,000 more hit points. It went from 44,800 to 47,400. So those are the changes. I'm looking forward to playing this update. The Michelangelo is the ship that is coming out, and I will hopefully be able to get that campaign finished quite quickly and get a video out on it. It's a brawling cruiser, and for those of you that have played with me and know me, I love playing brawling ships, so it's a one to look forward to. But anyways, thanks for watching. Please like the video, comment your thoughts on these patches, and I'll catch you in the game. See ya.